Welcome to the Low Carb Athlete Podcast, where we focus on discussing topics to help you burn fat, optimize health, and improve performance in life and sports. Transform the whole you from the inside out with the holistic method. Let's dive in. Here's your host, Debbie Potts.
Hello, my favorite low-carb aging athletes. I just wanted to share with you a special coupon code that I have from one of my favorite supplements, BioOptimizers. BioOptimizers has some great products that I often recommend to my health coaching clients based on their nutritional therapy analysis and their functional labs and food log symptoms that we look at. And a few of those are from BioOptimizers called HCl Breakthrough, Gluten Guardian, Magnesium Breakthrough, Capex, and their Masszymes enzymes, which is the strongest enzyme formula ever. And it has 5 different kinds of protease. Often we don't digest our food properly. So we are what we eat, but we also are what we can properly break down and absorb. So learn more from BioOptimizers. Check out their website and use our code LowCarbAthlete next time you go to purchase something. Enjoy. Hey everyone, it's Debbie Potts doing another solo cast. And I am going to go into what I've put together in my slides for a presentation coming up. And I just want to share it with you because you are the ones I'm talking to, the endurance athlete who strives to be fit and healthy from the inside out. So if you are wanting to watch a video and see the screen shots that I'm sharing my slideshow, you can head over to YouTube and look up Low Carb Athlete Podcast or Debbie Potts, and you should be able to find this, or I'll put the links in the show notes. So I'm going to use these slides to guide me from where I left off in the last part 2. And if you haven't heard of Dr. Dan Plews, he's done a lot of work with Paul Larson. And Dan Plews has a new program called Endure IQ that you can take. They have different courses. So if you want to learn more, head over to endurieiq.com, and it's with Dan Plews out of New Zealand. And they have a great, easy course that you can do online to learn more. But just to summarize things that Dan Plews is saying, Paul Larson, Peter Defty, what we learned years ago from Volek and Finney in their book that I have sitting here somewhere on my desk. But the endurance athlete, we are training our body to burn fat as fuel. And when we are going longer distances, we want to improve our ability to train longer at a higher and go faster at a higher heart rate. So Phil Maffetone taught me this eons ago. I started doing Ironman training in 2000. 2001 was my first Ironman Canada. And I started heart rate training back in the day with Sally Edwards. Oh my gosh, I feel old now. 1995 is like 24, 25 years old. And now I'm 50. I have always used heart rate training. And then when I started doing Ironman training with Mark Allen, before I started work with Mark, we were doing Maffetone 180 minus your age, which is now called the max aerobic function heart rate. So the point is we want to build our metabolic efficiency so we can get faster at, say, 150 heart rate, 140 heart rate. So when I go do a race, as my last race in Ironman Canada 2012, I was flying and feeling super strong, happy, having the best race ever, talking to people, cheering other people on. I was thriving, and I was able to race and do my best split ever on Ironman bike course. And that's a hilly one, keeping my heart rate in primarily fat burning. So then you can get off the bike and feel great on the run and feel fresh and run 1 mile at a time, 26 miles, 26.2. But I always think of it as 1 mile to the next aid station, get some water, hydrate, electrolytes, go again. So this is why I'm talking on the show about what Endure IQ put together, and then what I've learned from Maftone and everyone else and Mark Allen, and have them all back on the show. But go back to debbiepotts.net to find the archives on the podcast. 10 years ago, we started talking about this. All right, just to summarize where I left off in part 2 of this series, Endure IQ fat adaptation for athletes. So similar to what I've done for 10 years, I call it the holistic method, a 30-day reset. But we are looking at what I do kind of intuitively with clients when I start with them. Let's just look at what you're eating. I'm not going to change anything. Just show me, write down. I use nutritional therapy assessment log. That's a 3-day log. Ideally, do that 3 times. So we're tracking what you're eating, when you're eating, how are you eating? How do you feel after you eat? What is your motility, what your poop like each day? Because that's going to tell us a lot about your digestion. And then let's look at your energy levels and then matching your nutrition, your feeling with your exercise. So we'll track all that. So phase one, baseline, similar to what Endure IQ, I'm showing their phases here on the slideshow. We're just observing and watching your biometrics. I like people using a CGM if it's NutriSense or from their doctor, heart rate variability testing. I've got the new one from Hanu Health I'm testing out. I've got the Oura Ring. Some people like the Whoop. I don't like wearing a wristband to bed, so Oura Ring works best for me sleeping. And then we're just collecting data. I'm just observing, seeing what you're doing. And then we go to phase 2. Whole foods. Let's look at what you are eating and let's think of options, how to swap out, eat this, not that kind of thing. And then work on transitioning to whole foods. So I've done this in my 21-day sugar detox we started back in 2010. Eat real foods, nutrient-dense foods. Don't put a label on it, keto, paleo, carnivore, whatever. It's nutrient-rich foods. What's the most nutrient-rich foods you can have? Let's focus on that. Get rid of the packaged foods, the long list of ingredients, the garbage. Even if it says keto, a packaged food, it's usually a bunch of crap in it that we can't always absorb. So the erythritol, the monk fruit stevia often causes gas, mostly with the erythritol. So we're just working on baby steps. So working on this, phase 2. Then when we are ready, and this is different for women, we go to phase 3, cold keto. This is where we're working on that fat adaptation. Let's get you to depend on fat as your main fuel tank and carbs as your backup fuel tank. And then we work on being metabolically flexible in phase 4 because we don't want to stay in ketosis all the time. Nutritional ketosis, if we're an athlete, if we don't have health issues that require nutritional ketosis ongoing, like your epilepsy or you have a cancer or Parkinson's, it's not necessary. We want to be fat adapted so we can go longer, as S Fuels talks about. Okay, so phase 3 is 2 to 4 weeks. So say 3 weeks, you're going higher fat and dropping your carbs and getting the animal protein in, healthy fats, nuts and seeds. If you don't have gut issues, that might have irritants to your gut if you have leaky gut. Non-starchy vegetables. Females, we break this phase into 2 phases, going by your menstrual cycle, days 7 to 14. So we do 2 by 2 week block when we put this in, and I match that out on Training Peaks when I'm coaching female athletes. I'm putting this all together with their hormone cycle if they're premenopausal. So how do you fit training in and matching your fueling and training as an athlete? Endure IQ, Dan Plu's program, has this chart on the screen if you're watching. Phase 1, your exercise, as I'm just kind of as a coach observing, learning about your eating habits, your relationship to food. We're just going to keep what you're doing with your exercise program. I'm just observing. So when I do a new client assessment that I work on with a lot of people to get them started, let's just look at what you are doing. What are you eating? How you're sleeping? How are you moving throughout the day? Those elements of the holistic method. And then let's see what we could do better. Where are your areas of opportunity? What could we adjust? What can we do differently will be phase 2. So phase 2, whole foods, we're going to swap out, getting rid of the processed foods, refined sugars, refined flours, the vegetable oils, get rid of the packaged foods and figure out what meals can you make that are nutrient dense. So exercise during that time. Phase 2 will be keeping the routine the same, but reducing your volume around 10%. So a little bit less. We're just going to let the body adjust here. And then we're going to really make some adjustments. If you're coming from a high carb, low fat food plan, phase 3 cold keto, we want to work up to. So that's what phase 1, phase 2, and then phase 3, as we go into 50 grams or so carbs a day, we need to cut out our training. So we want to reduce training load by 25%, but we're still going to add in 2 high intensity interval trainings where we go all out and then recover, like that 30-second burst training, so we can still get some energy in. Now, phase 4, once you graduate from phase 3, cold keto, then we do really personalized program. We look at tweaking, course correcting, checking our biometrics, watching our heart rate variability, gradually increasing your training back up over 2 to 3 weeks, and we return to your normal training schedule here. So that's phase 4. So you can learn more on my blog on debbiepotts.net and the YouTube channel. You can be watching this right now on the Low Carb Athlete YouTube channel, and then the podcast previous episodes with all these amazing guests I've had on the show this year. Now, let's go into this a little more because that's where I left off of in part 2. Now, Dan Plu's program, phase 1, let's break this down a little more. You want to maintain what you're doing. We're just learning about your habits. So this is me working with my clients, more coaching people. I'm watching your glucose, your heart rate variability is HRV, food diary, establish what's normal for you. And I'm starting to understand how foods work for you, your relationships with food, and how your blood sugar and heart rate variability respond to that, as well as your life stresses. And then we can also start to see patterns and looking at your hidden internal chronic sources of stress. So if your resting heart rate goes up, if your glucose is higher, your ketones are lower, you can start to see some trends. And then time of day, like 2 a.m, if you are wide awake and your heart rates or glucose is higher, that is liver time in Chinese medicine. So kind of fun to put these pieces of the puzzle together. As we go into stage 2, we're looking at a whole foods diet, right? So we're going to look at what are you eating? What can we be better at intaking? Let's look at, like I've been trying to share on my Instagram, here's stuff at Trader Joe's that I'm going to look at. Here's Costco. I never go to Costco, but I went last weekend. I took some pictures. So I tried to share those ideas, but really eating real whole foods. So I've been getting Paleo Valley has a company called Wild Pastures, and I get that. And I have been getting Butcher Box, but making this transition to only getting Wild Pastures and getting my meat once a month. And then I get Farm Fresh to You type of box delivered to our house of local fruits and vegetables. Now I can't do fruits, but my husband Neil can. I'm very fructose intolerant, partially, I think, due to my hormones as I'm learning more about premenopausal. Okay, here we go. So not adjusting your macros yet in phase 2. We're just kind of removing the processed foods. So getting rid of the junk. Don't worry about macros. We're working on the habits. We're learning how real food tastes and creating what an Endure IQ, similar to Dr. Noakes' chart, the green and the orange food. So you look at the Noakes Foundation, they have their food list there that you can look up. Continue testing your heart rate variability and glucose. Really important to test because it is N=1, and we're also different in our sleep and our stress and how food reacts to you. So a lot of foods, we have different sensitivities, so everybody's a little different. So your heart rate variability decreases if you go too low of carbs too quickly. So it's a stress on your body. So lower HRV is more sympathetic type of fight or flight stress. So you might want to track that. And then high training loads will also impact your heart rate variability as well as reactive foods. As I said, so many of us have these reactive sensitive foods that we're sensitive to that we don't know about it and don't correlate that to a drop in our heart rate variability. So that HRV will really give us a lot of clues to what is best for you. So when we create a personalized fueling and nutrition and exercise program, we look at that. So increasing in your glucose, you might see carbs are too low if your glucose goes up higher because ketones are not made. Ketones are made by the liver, and glucose, too much stress, cortisol increases glucose increases, insulins increase, and then we can become insulin resistant. So remember, stress is important. So gradually working on this 3-4 step process, being fat adapted, is important if you are eating more of a high carb, sugary meal plan. So we want to watch inflammation and see how our body. So just small little steps is better, because remember, we don't want to add more sources of stress to our already stressful life. So phase 3, I'll move my little video here again. Phase 3, we've got cold keto. It's a 2-week adaptation, and we're trying to get that fat oxidation improved. So we want to see the BHB, if you're testing blood, above 0.5. So I just tested this morning with Keto Mojo, and I'm using BioSense, trying to look at blood and breath meters to see what works best for me, and also to see how exercise is going to impact that. It's going to be different when I post workout, depending on the type of the workout. And then morning, I might not show as much. And so that's not really the goal. The goal is to see throughout the day I'm burning fat, right? So goal to average 50 grams of carbs per day for 3 weeks or 2 weeks. If you are not exercising much, and females not being in that luteal phase. So you want to track what phase menstrual cycle you're in. So finding that sweet spot is what we get to. You're going to 50 to 130 grams or so. We'll match it with your fueling and training program as an individual when we get into phase 4. But just that cold keto is about 2 weeks in phase 3. And then we work towards finding your sweet spot for 3 weeks or so, and ongoing, keep course correcting, because that's going to change, right? Change with the time of the month, change with your workout load, and match everything. So low carb ketogenic phase is phase 3, and that's going to be higher fat, like a typical keto, 75% fat, and really dropping those carbs low, and then we'll switch back. But eating green foods on that food list, animal proteins, fat, nuts, dairy, seeds, vegetables. Now, you want to measure, like in Keto Mojo is on the slide here, or CGM is easier ongoing, but it's a little more expensive. So Keto Mojo is what I would use kind of periodically, and the CGM kind of cycle that in and out a few times a year, because it's a little more costly if you're on a budget like myself. But Keto Mojo is something I can have and have their strips. And just like I did this morning, let's see what my ketone level was after my bike ride. I was at 0.9 when I measured this morning, and I want to just see like 0.5. And remember, it's metabolic flexibility. We want keto flex, as Ben Azadi says. We're not supposed to be in keto all the time, especially females and athletes. So female athletes adjust cold keto, as I said, the late follicular to ovulation. So I would do it the first 2 weeks of your cycle, but missing that first part of your cycle is like days 1 to 4, but maybe start like day 5 or 7 to do your cold keto phase. Heart rate variability, we want to track daily. Glucose in the mornings, track and measure your progression. So we want to use Training Peaks with my clients, track all the metrics there. Or I use Practice Better for my clients and have Chronometer connects to Better, so we can track everything in Chronometer, and then I can see it on Practice Better. So we're keeping carbs to minimum, but we want to keep our exercise to minimum too. So that low intensity max aerobic function, keeping way below that max, and then add in a little HIIT trainings twice a week. That could be like the Tabata, 4 minutes. Okay, so a cold keto day, as Dan Plews talks about, like having your morning coffee, MCT and collagen. Now, I'm drinking my coffee right now. Have a sip. Now, I've been doing Laird's Superfood unsweetened creamer. It has little mushrooms in it, and I added extra mushroom blend, and I added some cinnamon and some collagen. So I'm fasting, but not fasting. I'm having fat, fuel, and calories. And female athletes, we want to have a little more calories. And I'm trying to experiment that having some calories is better than none, because I tend to not eat enough, I find. And so I think playing around with those ketones, see if they're higher, if I actually have more to eat. And that's keeping more fat and protein in my meals. And so my coffee is easier to drink, some collagen, protein, peptides in there, and some MCT oil, or like Laird's creamer has some MCTs from the coconut. So, I'm not fasted. I'm just staying a fat burning state. So fasted exercise isn't always recommended. If like this morning I did a bike ride for an hour that had some surges in it, hill climb. So I did 3 hills and I did some pickups. So my heart rate was anaerobic, burning glycogen stores. So I do want to eat some protein and some carbs post workout based on the research I'm reading, Dr. Stacy Sims and some other data coming out and looking at what Dr. Gabrielle Leon has shared too. So we want some minimal carbs, but I'm still burning fat and to help restore my glycogen stores for my next workout as I do master swim, typically, except for our pool's closed today for cleaning, but say at 12 o'clock. So looking at your day, but Dan Plu's day, he's working out a lot. His post-workout meal, and he's in New Zealand, eggs, sardines, broccoli, and coconut oil. It's a good cooking oil. Don't cook olive oil, high heat with olive oil. Remember, a lot of people, I have to correct them on that. That's not for high heat cooking. Coconut oil, ghee, avocado oil. I use bacon fat, cook bacon, and then use that fat for cooking eggs or vegetables, broccoli, and there's awesome. Coffee and cream. An S Fuels bar is about 20 grams protein, almonds, snack if he's doing a 2-day workout. Now, his lunch, he hasn't gotten to lunch, but salmon, olive oil, avocado, asparagus is a great meal idea. And then his dinner would be steak, simple salad plus dark chocolate for a little treat. And so he's getting about 50 grams of total carbs. So that's a ton of food. It doesn't mean you're not eating. And Dan obviously is working out a lot during cold keto day. Remember, it's less intensity, just a couple short Tabata type of sprint surges, but you are still training that body to be fat adapted. And if you're looking at the video slides, you can see glucose where we want it and keeping it controlled. You're not having big spikes more than 30. You're eating foods that work for you. Now, cold keto phase tips and tricks. Dan talks about heart rate variability decreasing is a normal response to cold keto because your body's adapting and it takes about 2 to 3, sometimes 4 weeks for some people, depending where they're coming from, where they're starting. And you want to meet your body, meet you where you're at. So we have to adjust. Glucose may increase. High cortisol. Remember, cortisol is a stress. That's my story. Life's not a race. It is a journey in my book. I shared this, but high cortisol as a body increases ketones. So as your body's adjusting, it's a stressor. So you might see the glucose higher because of higher cortisol. Higher intensity workouts, as Dan suggests, twice a week during cold keto helps the body adapting. So it's normal to have lower performance, but that little high intensity workout like a Tabata is a 8 times 20 seconds all out, 10 seconds rest. Maybe you do that at the end of an easy math heart rate workout on the treadmill or outside and do some 20-second pickups. Or if there's a slight hill up a driveway or road, doing 20-second sprints on a hill is a good short little HIIT training you could fit in. Now, sleep is really essential. I talk to my clients. This is almost the number one thing we have to work on before anything while we're working on just what they're eating, when and why, how, but your sleep. How do you start your day? How you end your day? So when you're doing cold keto, sleep can be disrupting, and carb timing at night, just like a 10 grams might help with your sleep. So if you tend to wake up a lot and maybe like 2 in the morning, you have the wide awake, that's often, like I said, liver time. It could be adrenals, pathogens going on, blood sugar could also drop and feel hungry. So having a little bit of honey before bed. I've been trying a little teaspoon of nut butter. It's not really carbs, but I'm going to try to add a little honey in there. I'm always afraid of that because I get headaches instantly from sugar. So I'm going to try that because I've been waking up a lot because I'm hot in the summertime, hot, cold issues. So looking at sleep, a little something before bed is not going to kill you. You want to get that sleep. So also remember that quote unquote keto flu when you're in that keto adapted, fat adapted phase. Your body's lower in carbohydrates, so you're going to drop a lot more electrolytes when you drop the glycogen stores. So salt, potassium, magnesium, that's why I like Real-Lite or LMNT. And at night, the magnesium, I swear by Bio-Optimizers, and there's a lot of people that support them, as well as Ben Greenfield. Bio-Optimizers has the optimal blend of 7 different magnesiums. So I would look at that, check out my discount code for that, as well as Keon. We have a discount code. So phase 4, you're finding that sweet spot. So this is where athletes and female athletes are going to be different. And then female athletes ovulation and late luteal phase, we're going to go maybe even more carbs and less fat, and adjust those macros based on your hormone cycle. So the low carb, high fat is LCHF, 100 to 200 grams of carbs, 10 to 20 grams plus or minus. You have to adjust it because this is where it's a template. We did cold keto, feed 50 grams, and that's what people do, normal people that do keto, but we're different. We're athletes, and then female athletes, we're even more different, right? So Dr. Stacy Sims talks about post-workout for women need to eat 30 minutes after to help that protein synthesis and reload those glycogen stores. If you did a more higher heart rate workout, it's going to deplete the glycogen stores, but men can wait up to 3 hours. So women, everything's different for you. For us, I am a female. So on the list you can get from the Noakes Foundation, their program, I'm drawing a blank, but the green foods, eat off that list, and then adding in the orange foods on the list. And we want to still avoid the red foods or do not eat. So we want to titrate those in and out. This is where it's great to use Keto Mojo or NutriSense so you can figure out your sweet spot. Again, we're not trying to stay in nutritional ketosis 24/7. It's being able to flex in and out of it, have that keto flex and metabolic flexibility. So we want to monitor our adaptation phase in that cold keto. And now we're going to start matching our nutrition and training to maximize our fat oxidation. So you want to check that and train that. And we're just watching everything. So this is what I do with clients because it's confusing and it's so individualized. So this is a very blank template to start with. Now, how do you know how to find your sweet spot? This is why I work individually with people, not do group programs, because I can't work with 30 people at once saying the same thing. Everyone's different. So here are some tips that Dan Plews talks about in the Endure IQ program. And again, you can go back and do his program yourself. It's very affordable and lots of good education and slides to look at. Now, heart rate variability may be decreasing when you're finding that sweet spot. That's going to give you that biofeedback. Your carbs are too low or your training intensity is too high. So if your HRV is dropping, look at why. What is that stressor? Now, if your glucose that you're testing Keto Mojo, glucose test, or if you're doing NutriSense, CGM, or from your doctor, you can get a CGM covered by insurance. That's even best. Carbs are too high or there's underlying inflammation. Take note of that because everybody that's coming to me has labs that they've done, blood chemistry, and I get them to do a GI map and a Dutch hormone panel, and they have chronic inflammation that's undetected when they do the regular labs with their doctor. So this is where I say, if you're trying to do all the right things and you're not getting results, the glucose is increasing. Maybe it's not just the carbs are too high, but there's internal sources of chronic stress, or you're overtraining and under recovery. So take note of that. High intensity performance, if your performance is going downhill like mine has been, if you've been over 6 weeks going sluggish feeling performance, this is what I've been experimenting with because I've been doing like low carb for so long. It's hard for me to add in carbs because you're like, oh, it's going to switch me on to fat burning. But if my performance sucks, add in some carbs. This is where Vespa is really powerful. So if you can get Vespa and use it on your key workouts, because they are expensive, but that will be where you want to nail your performance if you're doing a long quality training run, or you're trying to hit some speed work times, you're trying to get stronger faster, improve your performance, add in Vespa before that workout and maybe during the workout. Okay. So this is where I'm also going to experiment with Ketone IQ, which we have a discount code for as well for the podcast listeners. But Ketone IQ could be something to add in middle of a workout. But I do believe we tend to go too low of carbs. And my theory is I'm not hungry and I don't want to have anything, but my performance is not great. So if my goal is to improve performance and fat loss and longevity, adding a little bit of carbs like Vespa before is going to only help me reach my goals. Okay. So add more orange labeled foods on the list at dinner. And Ben Greenfield said this as well. And that will help you for your morning workouts. It's 20 grams. Vegetables is squash, beetroot, root vegetables. Now on the chart on my slideshow here, you can see rutabaga, beetroot, onions. I just had onions and steak. That's so good with eggs. Parsnip, potatoes, sweet potatoes, carrots. Those are underground vegetables that you can usually cook and have available. Potatoes are best cooked and then cooled. I had beets with goat cheese on a little bit of lettuce. I don't feel like lettuce lately. I used to be the salad queen, so it's really funny for me to say that, but beets and goat cheese and olive oil and sea salt, yummy. So those are some ideas for you. Now, this is what more and more I'm hearing about, and I think we all agree on this in our endurance athlete space. If we're designed to, if we're striving to improve athletic performance, we want to look at more cyclical keto, or what's called TKD, targeted ketogenic diet. For example, this is more high intensity work planned out certain days of the week. You might need to add in additional carbs right before or even during that workout. If you're doing a high intensity training that requires glucose, so glycogen, focus on glycogen, keep your energies levels up during these workouts, choose easily digested carbohydrate, and experiment with that amount before you found your target. Now, this is from an article, superfat.com, keto diet for endurance athletes. But this is what Dr. Stacy Sims is saying, and everyone's different. You can hear, you can look up and find opinions and answers like all across the board for everything. So N=1, experiment on, is this helping me get stronger and faster? Is this helping me recover? How are my workouts feeling? If you're just slogging through your workout and you're fine with that, I want to kick ass. So I want to get stronger and faster and get my running turnover improved and be able to bike. Biking's easier for me, but just to have that little kick, that's where you can try Vespa or Laird Superfoods. Their creamer you can put in your coffee has a little bit of carbs from the coconut sugar. So that's my experiment, because I'm not like, what carbs do you want to eat that are easy to digest before a workout that I could just drink? That would be having them in my coffee or tea, right? Or my shake post-workout, maybe add some frozen berries in there, and then that will be a little bit of carbs for you with your protein. So post-workout protein. So other things on cyclical keto diet that I pulled up on the screen here, CKD is based on alternating schedules. So example on CKD diet is 5 to 6 days you're doing keto, then 1 to 2 days you up your carbs with healthy carbs. Remember, we're talking about quality carbs, not crap. So intake your healthy carbs of sweet potatoes, winter squash, or legumes, if that works for you. The aim is to temporarily replenish your glycogen stores to help build muscle mass, improve performance. You're refeeding the carbohydrates so you can go harder at the gym and quickly start that cycle back up and getting back into ketosis. Also, you can look at doing a nightly refeed if you're doing a harder workout the next day. Again, females should avoid keto all the time and fasting the week before their cycle begins. So don't fast or do nutritional ketosis, say day 20 to 28 or until your cycle ends or begins. So you add more hormone building carbs that week. You can look at Dr. Mindy Pell's progesterone building foods, or I put that all on my blog page. So say you're doing 5 days on keto and then 2 days refeed. So you can do that. A 5-1-1 is once a month. You're doing like a 24-hour or once a week meal to meal. So they say you're doing lunch 3:00 on Sunday. You're not eating again until 3:00 on Monday. Ben Greenfield does this like a Saturday to Sunday, and that's his rest day on Sunday. So you could do something like a 24-hour fast once a week or once a month, or see what works for you. I have people start doing a bone broth fast for that, but that's just something to add in to help with cell autophagy. So you're not doing excessive fasting during the week, and you're looking at how you can up that fat burning. So Training types. Let's go back to Endure IQ and how we coach people. So matching your feeling and training for improved fat loss, health, and performance. So there's endurance training, strength endurance, Ironman training, specific. 70.3 is going to be different training than Ironman with the interval part. And then VO2 max development. And then there's speed development. So we look at different types of training. So HIIT training means high and low glycogen state. When you're post-workout, your glycogen state will be more depleted, and that allows for higher expressions of adaptation in low glycogen state athletes versus fully fed athletes. Low glycogen increases in fat metabolism and sees superior adaptation to that training source. So that means that training low, racing high, doing some HIIT training helps deplete that muscle glycogen storage more and helps your body turn on that fat metabolism. So training zones, there's lots of different zones, but Dan Plu's Endure IQ program, we look at 6 zones. And so you can look at zone 1 is recovery, endurance, to tempo, to threshold, to VO2 max, to zone 6 is anaerobic. So carb timing is going to change based on the intensities increase. Your need for a little bit more carbs will be adjusted. So if you're doing 80% of your time in zone 2 endurance, you're training that fat metabolism, improving that fat oxidation so you can train longer and burn higher percentage of fat like I used to do doing Ironmans, that I could be at a great fast pace at say 145 heart rate and be able to get off the bike and run strong in an Ironman. That my endurance zone, I did a lot of training there with Mark Allen. So 80% training down in zone 2 for Ironman. And then we add in the HIIT training when you're doing race specific work. So that goes to endurance training is 80% to work on a fat oxidation, more maffetone type of max aerobic function training. And so we can work on the different module. What's called polarized training is 80-20 split, and the pyramidal is 60-40 model. So depending on what race you're doing and where you are in your training, how far along you are in your endurance phase. Sometimes we need to stay a little longer in that low heart rate training foundation phase before we start doing too much speed work. But so it depends on the training cycle where you are and where your race time is, where you might get into different type of training as you get closer to the race. So polarized training versus pyramid, you can go to endureiq.com, their blog, and their training intensity distributions. You can read about that in your free time on long distance training for Ironman type of training. Now, what is polarized training? A little bit more zone 1 training is what we're looking at and spending more time here, 80%, zone 2 and 3. Stimulate the high intensity adaptation for 20% when we start adding in more speed work. So that's where we're going to look at how we train you individually in our one-on-one programs. S Fuels, we did a podcast with them and I added in some information from their website. They have tons of good resources there. So summarize 80-20, and Dan Plews and Zach Bitter are both on their board or advisors for S Fuels with Leighton Phillips. Training as a low carb athlete to improve your fat oxidation response. We want to burn more free fatty acids and or ketone bodies to fuel us at higher and higher intensities. As I said, we want to say 145, 150 heart rate. I want to keep burning that percentage of fat, and the amount of fat I'm oxidizing goes higher. Now, fat oxidation while training is very valuable to the endurance athlete as Ironman or 50K, 100K runner, an endurance athlete, because we want to preserve our glycogen stores. Remember, that's our backup fuel tank that we want to have them when we're going to do a surge or start running harder in the run phase of an Ironman or 70.3, so we can kick it up a notch. So we're enabling that stable fuel energy to muscles through flexible and stimulate, I can't talk, supply of fat and carbs substrate. So we have a dual fuel of fat and carbs coming in, and on Ketone IQ podcast we did, you can learn about HVMN, Ketone IQ. They have new little small bottles that I'm going to experiment with this weekend on my bike and my run, is having that dual fuel in my brain, carbs and ketones. So you can add in a little shot of ketones when you're doing more of a higher intensity or event that requires more thinking and like adventure racing. So athletes should spend the majority of their time in zone 2 to 80% of their time to optimize their aerobic metabolism while minimizing the inflammatory load and triggers. And that's what I'm doing with the lab testing part of my coaching program, maximizing your recovery time, tracking your heart rate variability, looking at your resting heart rate, if we're having any triggers of chronic stress externally, and then these hidden internal stressors impact you, your whole you, and cause metabolic chaos, which is my story. So high intensity interval training is an important part that we add in. That 20% high intensity interval training and fueling is critical to optimal performance. So that 20% HIIT training we'll get into, because a lot of people are not doing that hard enough to make it effective, or they're doing too much HIIT training. So matching your fueling training and performance, let's look at S Fuels, what you can do. So their train drink is endurance drink, and I don't get paid by them. I just want to share this because I can never find fuel for my days racing. I just had to have a sip. This is so good. So I'll tell you what I'm drinking. My coffee from Laird's has some vitamin D in it, mushrooms. And then I blended in the Magic Bullet a little bit of heavy cream because I can't wean myself off my heavy cream. And I put a scoop of collagen peptides, cinnamon, and the Laird's unsweetened creamer. And I put in some extra mushrooms and blended it. And it's so amazing. So good. Okay. So S Fuels, here we go. Train. If you're training, it's low intensity, long duration. So you're going on for a 3-hour bike ride. This will help you stay fueled when you're fat adapted. Now, if you're going over a little longer than 2 hours, you might need to have a bar or something in that long ride. Now, that's if you're keeping the heart rate down low. And this has helped a low carb, high fat kind of keto transition period too. Have a little extra. We'll go over the ingredients in the podcast I did this month with S Fuels Late, and we went over what's in there, but glutamine is one of my favorite things for gut health. Now, what if you're doing a high intensity workout? This is where I do S Fuels Race and their drink and combine it together for an anaerobic and aerobic intensity. So used for high intensity training and speed work. And then on race day, you can create this gel powder in a flask. It's called Race Plus Powder with high levels of highly branched starch that are the slow release energy, and mixes to concentrated gel form for high training and racing. Now, some people like UCAN. I used to use that and had a lot of people had stomach problems, but I never did. But the gel powder, I think is pretty cool that S Fuels has. Try out is what I would try. So here's the S Fuels, the powder drink mix. Go longer. It has 4 grams of fat, 3 grams of protein, 240 milligrams sodium, 50 milligrams potassium, 500 milligrams of glutamine. So they have that option for you. And then they have charts on their website, the low intensity training fuel. So if you're on the slides, you kind of can see it, but they give you a guide. If you're training 1 hour, 2 hour, 3 hour, 4 or 5, swimming, cycling, running, or a track work, what fuel to have. Now, if you're doing a low carb diet or if you're doing high carb, here's some options. So that's on there. So we want to match our fueling with their training. And so working with my clients, help them find what best sources of whole food carb sources are good when they need to time it. Nutrient timing is key, and matching to intensity fuel. Now, again, women are different. Dr. Stacy Sims' book, Roar, and her new one out for menopausal women, I'm finishing up, has some tips in there. And, the timing of it, the science behind it makes sense. The food choices I would differ from. A lot of people can't do gluten, grain. So finding alternatives to having grains, but having maybe like a quarter banana and some almond butter or sunflower butter might be better for some people, or some nuts. So essential amino acids, I do Kion. I trust their product and their research. They're always reformulating it if they need to, but pre, during, and after exercise. And doing the S Fuels bar, if you're doing, say, a 4-hour ride post-workout, I would add a shake and then have your larger meal post long workout. And that's where you put those good carbs in, time it right. And then liver muscle glycogen tanks might be empty if you did a higher intensity workout. So that's when you add in that little more carbs into that meal post workout, when you're ready to eat and you're able to be in parasympathetic, because we want proper digestion. So lower carb to high carb later in that meal, depending on the workout, when you can afford those carbs and they'll be used by your muscles, not stored as fat. I think that was all. S Fuels, higher intensity day, pre-workout, you might do a S Fuels bar or fat black coffee. And kind of what I was doing this morning, essential amino acids, I said that. So that last little bit here, train low, race high. So we'll get into this a little more. I want to talk to Dan Plews about this, science behind it. But Ben Greenfield had some articles back in the day. He wrote a book, Low Carb Triathlete Training Program, and he's not really into triathlons anymore. So he hasn't written anything lately. He's more into what we should be, longevity. So not those with hypercholesterolemia. You want to make sure you do a genetic test, PPAR gene, any inflammatory issues you want to look at before you do tons of saturated fat. Genetic tests, I think, are important to do. People are afraid of sharing their data, but that's how we learn. So I'm always kind of questioning that, but I think learning about your genetics will help you figure out if keto, what type of saturated fats, or if you need more of a Mediterranean style food plan. So if you don't fall into that category of having a genetic SNP as PPAR, you can keep ketotic, kind of cycling in and out a few days before a race, adding more sweet potatoes, yams, white rice that's cooked and cooled, safe starches, healthy carbs. So the muscles soak up those carbs and the performance improves, but it requires carb depletion beforehand. So that's in Ben's old book. Dr. Dan Plews' racing plan, he'll do, testing glucose, oxidation rate for different carbs on people. If you're less than 60 grams carbs an hour, oxidation rates were like 1 gram a minute. You want to play it safe, be in low carb phase to preserve your glycogen stores. Before race, 20 grams, pre-race, every 20 minutes, 20 grams to, so like 60 grams an hour for some. That works for Dan. He's racing high Ironman. He's, obviously fast and strong. So he's going to be higher heart rate on race day. And some of you might just be trying to finish. So individualize this information. Hydration of fluids on the run, 110 grams total is what he would do, and nothing new on race day. We always want to remember. So you want to test ideally your oxidation rate and test your glucose for how carbs impact you using a CGM or Keto Mojo, and different carbs. Everyone's going to respond a little differently. So make sure you train low and then race high. So top athletes, look for some source of carbohydrates. Fat adapted athletes are training low, racing high approach. Again, summarize, everyone is unique. Test your fueling performance plan. Lack of carb intake while racing can decrease your performance. So don't think if you're racing, trying to win your age group like I would do and kick butt, you can do it without eating anything, but your performance is going to suffer. So if you want to actually do well and beat people, you might need to add a little something in there. So like on the run, you might add in a gel. Test your fat oxidation values. And then remember, training, they got GI stress from excessive carb intake due to low maximum fat oxidation rates. Excess sodium plus poor training plus high stress levels can impact the stress in the gut. So I always have glutamine, and S Fuels has glutamine in their product for that reason, for gut repair. But in my shakes, I put videos on my Instagram that having some glutamine and colostrum in my post-workout shake with a Kion whey protein and having collagen peptides, and my avocado frozen makes it all creamy and yummy. So that is it for today. We'll go on to racing fuel plan next time, and hopefully this information helps you out. I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and there you are. So let me know if you have questions. I will try to do a solo podcast each month, the last week of the month. is my goal, but let me know how I can help you. Head to debbiepotts.net, schedule a free discovery call to chat with me about your goals, your areas of opportunity, and how you can live your best life now and train now for your future self, right? So fat loss, performance, and longevity should be our goal. Thanks for listening. See you next time.
Thanks for listening to the Low Carb Athlete Podcast. If you have any questions, feedback, or topic suggestions, let us know on Facebook or at debbiepotts.net. You can help us to continue to grow by leaving a review on iTunes. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.